In South Carolina, police are alerted to an abandoned car in a field.
There is not a lot of information. They simply said they were reporting a car that had been there overnight.
The windows on the vehicle appeared to be black and soot covered.
Is there anybody alive or dead in that car? Has someone been trying to get rid of evidence? If so, why?
The car is empty. A license plate search finds the owner lives 12 miles away.
They got no response at the front door. As the officer walks into the backyard, there were 2 male victims in there, both with gunshot wounds to their head.
There are a range of emotions that may drive an offence like this. Greed, revenge, anger.
It's really important that CSI teams get to that scene as soon as possible.
You need to tell us what you know.
Who was it?
We need to find out who they are.
What you know is monumental to this case.
We need to catch that killer at that crime scene.
Horry County's a pretty diverse area. You have beautiful stretch of beach along one end of it with a lot of high-end homes. And as you move inland, some areas are extremely desolate and not very well populated, very quiet neighborhoods. When something major happens in the inland areas, it's always a bit of a shock to everybody.
In a remote community on the outskirts of Conway in South Carolina, an officer secures the scene of the shooting.
At that point, he had no way of knowing when they had been killed, by whom they had been killed, where the killer or killers were, that no one was laying in wait for them.
Finding no one else at the property, CSIs scope out the scene. The gunshot victims are identified as the homeowner and his 25-year-old son, Robert and Robbie Ford.
The older victim, Robert, is on the ground at the back of the house with a close contact gunshot wound under his chin. The younger, Robbie, is found off to the side of the driveway. He has a gunshot wound to the back of his head and a gunshot wound to the upper right shoulder. The doors to the residence were locked, so neither victim had gone into the house yet. Robbie appeared to be trying to flee. His cell phone was found next to his body, and the pocket that it was in had been pulled out of his shorts as if he was frantically trying to get his phone out to call for help.
To shoot someone from close range who is already shot and debilitated on the ground really is cold.
As well as the family car, Robert and Robbie's wallets have been taken from their pockets.
One of the first things we wanted to check, did someone go into the home? Was this a burglary gone bad? Because there really were no other leads. Not quite a year before the murders, there had been a burglary reported at Robert's home. One of the things that had been reported stolen was a .38 caliber revolver. It's just one of those things that's sort of interesting and makes you go, is this some sort of pattern? But some of the things that sort of counted against that was that it did not appear that their home had been entered.
It appears both victims were returning home when someone came upon them. This is clearly an ambush type of situation.
The killer had maybe been observing or stalking the victims, so they were prepared in terms of what they were intending to do and how they were intending to do it.
Their deaths send shockwaves across the neighborhood.
Robert and Robbie were long-term members of that community. Good, Southern people who lived here their whole lives. They were well liked by their neighbors.
From everyone who I have spoken to, Robert was a devoutly religious man. He was extremely involved in his church. He taught Sunday school along with his late wife. He was the choir director. He sang in the men's choir and in the quartet. Just a very well-respected member of the community. Robbie Ford was a devoted son and was a hardworking student working towards an architecture degree. He played an active role as a caregiver for his mother in the final days of her life. There was really no reason for someone to commit this horrific crime.
CSIs suspect the men were killed several hours ago.
Time is of the essence, and that is whether the crime has just happened or it's 10 or 12 hours old. There's still a lot of evidence that can be recovered in the first few hours of examinations that you don't want to lose. The longer the bodies have been there, the more critical the golden hour becomes. So immediately, my first thought would be to see if you can find the bullet casings. If you find the bullet casings, it will give you an indication as to where potentially the shots were fired from and also how many shots were fired.
One of the things that stands out is that there are no fired shell casings. Now, with the two types of handguns, you have a revolver where that fired cartridge casing stays in the gun. Then the other type of handgun you have is a semi-automatic where that shell casing is ejected from the firearm. Therefore, it would be at the scene unless someone picked it up. So immediately we need to start thinking, is this a revolver or is this someone who is so forensically aware that they picked up the shell casings?
Finding no trace of the shooter anywhere, it appears they have covered their tracks.
This is an offence that has been premeditated, organised, thought out. The killer's approach is ruthless and brutal.
It was a targeted attack. The killer meant business.
That's leading us in a totally different direction now. This perhaps may be somebody who is intimately related to the victims and was looking to seek revenge.
But with the motive unclear, the team needs a forensic breakthrough to lead them to the shooter.
There is such urgency. There is a killer on the loose. We are doing everything we can to track that killer down. We have no eyewitnesses, so we are relying on the evidence that is recovered at the scene to tell us the story of what happened.
CSIs expand the search into the land around the Ford's home.
We came across a hunting camera. If it's captured the images that we're hoping it's captured, then we may have an identity on our offender. That camera is our most critical piece of evidence. What it may have documented would tell the entire story here.
In South Carolina, police are investigating a brutal double murder after finding popular father and son Robert and Robbie Ford shot dead on their doorstep.
This has raised concerns to a lot of citizens. Who do we have on the loose here? Could it happen on my street, in my house? So we've got to come up with an answer on this as quickly as we can.
The killer appears forensically aware, but they may have missed a key detail. A wildlife camera has been recovered from the scene and sent for analysis.
Based on the placement of the camera, it should have captured images of the offender attacking Robert.
That would be a priority examination by the technical teams, the digital team, to see what information's on that camera.
It was determined that the camera had no power to it. The pictures that it had captured were from a year earlier. It was a huge blow to us.
The crime scene points to Robert and Robbie being deliberately targeted. The autopsy confirms they were shot at point-blank range with the same .38 caliber firearm. In search of a motive, the team looks deeper into their lives.
based on my years of experience and the lack of reasoning behind the murder of these two, my thinking from the beginning was that a family member may be involved. Because there's no reason for these two to be dead.
Detectives find 59-year-old Robert was a devoted dad, grandfather, and brother.
Robert Ford was very frugal and really worked his whole life to be able to provide for his children.
Robert has 2 children, Robbie and Samantha.
Samantha Ford Rabin, Robert's daughter from a previous marriage, spent much of her time with her mother but would visit her father often on the weekends. He and his first wife were divorced fairly early on, and then Robert remarried and married Robbie's mother, and they were married for 26 years before she died. Robbie and Samantha were in constant communication. By all accounts, the family was very close. They would spend holidays together. They would often bring meals to each other.
Still no closer to identifying who wanted Robert and Robbie dead, the team needs a forensic breakthrough. Detectives request the men's phone data and begin to track their last known movements, while CSIs turn their attention to the stolen car.
We certainly believed that whoever drove that car was the person who had killed Robert and Robbie.
Whoever would have driven the vehicle there may have left fingerprints, DNA. After searching in over a 200-foot radius around the vehicle and finding nothing, as I approach the vehicle closer, there are cigarette butts on the ground just outside the driver's door. If the car was parked on a roadway, the cigarette butts may not be relevant at all. But in this particular case, there's 3 of them just outside the driver's door of this vehicle.
The cigarettes are sent for forensic testing.
Cigarette butts are an incredibly good source of DNA evidence. The DNA is actually on the outside because that surface is in contact with the smoker's lips. It's not actually the filter itself, which is contaminated with nicotine. The skin cells from your lips are actually transferred onto the end of the cigarette butt. This is where the DNA is going to be.
Taking a closer look at the Ford's car, CSIs are concerned any further evidence may be lost.
Once I open the vehicle up, I can smell some type of a flammable liquid. I'm seeing charring on the steering wheel, the driver's seat, the console in the vehicle.
Initially, the thought that the car had suffered so much fire damage was thought to be a setback. But as we are looking more at the scene, we realize that the car was not completely engulfed in flames.
By closing the doors and windows, the oxygen in the vehicle was consumed by the fire and actually smothered itself. Inside the vehicle, a ski cap and sweatpants were found. Although they had smoke and a little bit of fire damage, they may hold a DNA profile. So this was not a rocket scientist, doing this crime.
On one hand, the killer was well planned and organized, but as they come to dispense of the evidence, it seems that they maybe experienced a moment of panic.
The car is sent off to be examined further in a controlled environment. Using CCTV and phone data, detectives have pieced together Robert and Robbie's final hours.
Robert and Robbie were looking for an apartment in the Charleston area for Robbie, who was going to be studying there the next semester. So they had traveled down there, looked at a few apartments, and then stopped for dinner on the way home.
While at the restaurant, Samantha messages Robbie. This is the last time anyone was in contact with the men. At 9:15, their neighbor hears gunshots.
There are quite a few lawfully possessed guns in Horry County, so it's not unusual to hear gunshots. But what was different in this case was that it was a number of gunshots interrupted by a scream.
10 minutes later, Robert's car is caught on camera.
We had surveillance video from a nearby business showing the car being driven past. That was on the route that would have been traveled from the scene of the murder to where the car was found. And that was very helpful in establishing the timeline of that night.
Now able to pinpoint when Robert and Robbie were killed, the team confirms alibis for all relatives. The evidence recovered from the car is the last remaining lead. The cigarettes and the ski cap return the same male DNA profile. It's run through the police database, CODIS.
Unfortunately, in this case, CODIS did not give us a hit. That means that the killer had never been put in the system before. It was a real blow to our investigation.
This case is going to go cold if we don't come up with something new.
We had to start thinking outside of the box, and the Horry County Police Department decided to look into forensic genealogy. This was really an innovative step.
Forensic genetic genealogy is basically the use of genetic genealogy databases to assist in the identification of a potential suspect. Lots of us do genealogy tests because it's interesting. A lot of us want to know how much DNA do we share, can we find a third or fourth cousin, and people are actively choosing to send their samples because they want to find distant relatives.
By identifying genetic matches between people in these databases and the crime scene DNA, the team are hoping to narrow down the search for the shooter to one particular family.
We take small fragments of DNA and we look at how many of those fragments of DNA you share with other people. And then you've got a possible family connection for who that DNA profile belongs to.
Although not foolproof, it's possible for forensic genetic genealogists to locate a third cousin or closer in 90% of Americans. The male DNA from the Ford's abandoned car is sent for analysis, but the team must be patient.
A forensic genetic genealogy investigation is as long as a piece of string, basically, because there's a lot of computer algorithms involved in looking at relatives. So it could be in excess of 6 months to do just one case.
As the months pass, the pressure builds.
Robert's two sisters were really going after the investigators. What have you found? Do you have any leads? Law enforcement and prosecutors are waiting and waiting and waiting to get back results that could really make or break a case.
A year later, they find out if it's been worth the wait.
They're able to give us the names of 3 brothers. 2 of those brothers were already in the CODIS system, so investigators were able to rule them out, leaving us with that one remaining brother, Randy Granger.
At the time of the murders, Granger was living close to the scene of the Ford's abandoned car.
Granger did have a criminal history for kidnapping and robbery. He had actually spent 15 years in the prison system, but he was released just prior to the passage of the act that allowed the collection of DNA for this database that we now know as CODIS. And so he sort of just missed that cutoff.
Granger has a military background. Here is somebody who's been trained to survive under combat and follow orders. Somebody who is familiar with using a gun and able to kill at close range.
But to secure a warrant for Granger's arrest, the team still needs a direct DNA sample, as forensic genetic genealogy is not always admissible in court due to concerns over quality.
Forensic genealogy is kind of used for intelligence purposes. It gives you an indication as to who it might be, but then you need to confirm that.
Determined not to let Granger slip from their grasp, he's put under surveillance and his phone data is investigated.
When we are using cell tower data, what we try to do is identify 3 locations of interest. In this case, they identified the scene where the car was abandoned, the murder scene, and Samantha's home because she was the last person we knew who had contacted the victims. He actually turned his phone off at the murder scene, but we were able to squarely place him at the scene of the abandoned car.
At 10:15, Granger calls his girlfriend, Teresa Martin.
At the time of the murders, they were living together. We had him pinging at the car scene because he had to call Teresa to pick him up.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you in a court of law.
Randy Granger and Teresa Martin are brought in for questioning.
All right, well, thank you for coming here this morning.
You
We want to talk to you about a couple of things.
I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous. It's okay. We just got some questions for you. Okay.
We're very confident that we have 2 of the right people with Granger and Martin. We have the genealogical DNA match as well as the tower data. But if you look at it, it just didn't make sense. Granger and Martin didn't have any obvious motives.
It makes this look like a planned hit.
What do you know about anything that Randy has been involved in while you guys were dating?
Nothing. Because I had time getting the rascal out of bed. He's not no bad person. He don't drink, he don't do drugs. He's just lazy.
So you never known Randy to be any, like, kind of violent, nothing like that?
I've never known him to be in any kind of trouble.
We knew that there was someone else involved. And in order to get to that person, we had to have either Martin or Granger talk.
Exactly 2 years on from the brutal murders of Robert and Robbie Ford, investigators believe they're on the verge of a breakthrough.
Morning, Randy. Do you mind? Yeah, come sit right here for me.
Evidence points to Randy Granger as the shooter, helped by his former girlfriend, Teresa Martin.
Looking at just the 2 of them, Granger and Martin didn't have any obvious motives. We knew that there had to be someone else in play. The goal was to try and get to the person behind the murders. What we came to learn was that Teresa Martin was kind of loosely related to Robert's daughter, Samantha Rabin.
Samantha?
Yes, sir.
How old do you know Samantha?
She's a good girl. She, don't bother nobody either. As you know, she's got them 3 kids she has to take care of.
Teresa lived next door to Samantha's mother and had spent quite a deal of time with members of Samantha's family.
As far as I know, she loved her daddy. Because she put, she posted on Facebook about his birthday and stuff, and that she loved him and stuff, which I know she loved her daddy. I mean, anybody's got a daddy's gonna love him.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, that's all I can tell you about that.
Martin engaged in what I call progressive truth-telling. She would give little bits of the story, but the detectives were very good about leaving her alone for a little bit, coming back into the room and confronting her with evidence that we did have.
Investigators ask her about the Ford's car.
So down the street from you, there was a car fire. And at that car fire, we know Randy was there.
Oh, no, I don't know.
But you picked him up from it.
No, I did not.
It's starting to worry her. And then slowly, by using the rapport that they've built with her, they are starting to get the information.
I'm not saying you know about it, but we know that you were right there where the car fire was, and Randy.
Well, I don't know nothing about the fire, but I did pick him up down the road, but it was way down the road.
Talk to me about that.
He called me. He said, it's raining, come and pick me up. He never mentioned about nothing. Honest to God, on my dead dad's grave, he never said anything to me about nothing.
But you're not telling us 100% truth. Obviously, we got your cell phone records, and we got text messages.
Tell us what you know, please.
Will I get in trouble?
If you're not involved, no.
I'm not involved.
But what you know is monumental to this case.
Martin was fairly cooperative. It was clear that she wanted to be able to testify in an effort to get a better deal.
We don't want you to be in trouble at all. Let me tell you this, and I will tell you this. He's in the next room, because we're going to go talk to him. If he's going to tell us something that incriminates you, you need to tell us first to get out in front of it.
Convinced Granger is the shooter, the team still needs a direct DNA sample to confirm the results of the forensic genetic genealogy and link him to the Ford's car.
The forensic genealogy leads us to potential suspect, but the buccal swab is required to confirm it.
We have a search warrant for your DNA. 2 sets of buccal swabs from Randy Granger. Buccal swabs are a Q-tip in your mouth, okay? Open up.
It's actually a swab from the skin cells around the mouth. It's the skin cells that would provide the full DNA profile.
As they await the results, Teresa Martin breaks under the pressure.
Now, obviously, we had detectives come to your house this morning, knock on your door, and talk to you politely about coming out. Mm-hmm. We didn't come over there kicking in doors, sending a SWAT team, arresting you, nothing like that. Because we wanted you to come here and speak to us in a calm fashion, just like we're doing, have a conversation.
We want to give you the opportunity to be honest with us.
I heard that he done it.
You heard that who done it?
Randy.
Who'd you hear from?
Him.
You know, based on everything that they had been looking at, they had a strong feeling this was their man. It was just a matter of getting something to prove it.
When the results of the DNA swab come back, Granger is cornered.
The cigarette butt that was collected from the ground came back as a match to the profile developed in this case.
I got your DNA off of 3 of these that were sitting right outside of this car. That matches this skull cap with DNA on it.
Some hair in it.
That matches the cigarette butt.
Randy Granger was in the vehicle that day. This is a major accomplishment for us. This is good detective and forensic work coming together.
What do you think about it for a second?
Sit there and look at these.
I know it's a lot.
We'll be back in about 5 minutes.
But the team still needs to identify who recruited him.
You're not the one I want to deal with on this.
When they do leave, you can kind of see the cogs ticking in Granger's head. You can see his chest going up and down, suggesting fear, anxiety, panic.
I know you didn't do this by yourself. What I want is the person who asked you to do it. Who are I? You really want to play stupid? I'm serious now. Because I got you right now for at least 2 counts of murder, arson, criminal conspiracy for something that wasn't your idea, I want the person who hired you to do it or asked you to do it, because that's the only way that this benefits Mr. Randy. Do you understand that?
Only a lawyer, I guess.
With Granger clamming up, police need to keep Teresa talking.
Listen, I know you're not being completely honest. So at this point, Miss Teresa has to worry about Miss Teresa. Everybody else is out the window.
We know you guys were hard up for money. We know Randy was very hard up for money. Like you said, he was lazy, didn't have a job. I think somebody gave him a job.
But see, since like you said, somebody gave him a job.
Who was it? It's gonna feel good once you get it off your shoulders.
Samantha did? Okay.
Samantha had been on our radar the whole time. Robert's two sisters were really going after the investigators. Samantha, on the other hand, really was not interested in how the investigation was going, and I think that that's something that sort of keyed the detectives to look at her more closely.
With the focus now on Robert's daughter, Samantha, investigators still need to verify Teresa's confession.
From a forensic point of view, that's incredibly difficult to prove, because if they've never been to the scene, there's no evidence at that scene that can link them back to it. Digital forensics can play a really important role when you can't physically put someone at that crime scene.
Experts find no evidence of Samantha and Granger having ever communicated. They need to find out if someone acted as the go-between.
Using the cell tower data along with phone records, investigators were able to see that in addition to being in contact with Granger, Martin had also had frequent contact that day with Samantha Rabin.
On the day of the murder, cell site data shows Teresa and Samantha were in contact 24 times.
One of those communications fell in line with the timeline that we created for the murder, and that text message was from Martin to Samantha Rabin saying, "I'm home alone."
Why did you send that message? You did that so she would know that he was there.
Yeah.
Did someone tell you to send her that message?
No, I sent it myself.
You just did it all by yourself?
Yes, sir. I just told her I was home alone.
Okay.
You know.
But that was key phrase for...
It's happening.
Okay.
After she was confronted with that text message is when she revealed the entire plot. She helped lay the groundwork. She provided the connection between Samantha Rabin and Randy Granger. Teresa Martin tells us that Samantha Rabin approached her and asked her to bring Randy Granger to her, that she had a job for him to do. And when Teresa Martin brings Randy Granger together with Samantha Rabin, Rabin asks Granger, "Will you take care of my dad and my brother? And it's got to be done this weekend."
I know this is the hard part to say, but you knew he was going to kill them people.
No, I didn't. Honest to God, I did not. On my dead daddy's grave, I did not.
Did he tell you that day that he had a job?
He said that he had Samantha hired him to do a job at her daddy's house, and that's all I know.
Okay, hold. Now, did he tell you that day, and then ask you to bring him over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I dropped him off in the road. I never pulled in the driveway or nothing.
Well, no, that's fine. I understand.
Yeah. And I left. That's all was across the street.
What was Randy supposed to get out of it?
I say she was supposed to pay him $20,000.
Okay.
Samantha and Randy really only had that one deadly contact when she asked him to kill her father and brother. Granger studiously avoided contact with Samantha because he knew that anyone who was in contact with her would become a target for police. folklore tells us that you always want to look at the people closest, but in my 31 years of prosecuting, this is the only case I have had where someone hired a hitman to kill their relatives. There really is some evil that you see in paying someone to kill your father and brother.
This isn't an emotional or impulsive crime. It's a means to an end. That level of detachment and callousness is really quite concerning. Why would you do that to your father and to your brother? What could be so important? That relationship meant nothing to Raybon.
Digital experts recover disturbing searches in Samantha's internet history.
Legally, we don't have to prove motive, but sometimes you have to convince the jury. Because otherwise, like, why would she kill them? You want to give them a reason why she would.
Accused of masterminding her father and brother's murders, Samantha Raybon is taken into custody.
Anything you say can't overuse the issue in court of law. You have the right to talk with a lawyer, have him present with you on your lead question.
She clearly was not happy. I don't think it came as a complete surprise to her.
As you know, the client's not giving a statement at this time. Don't say anything at this point. Everything in this room is recorded, okay?
She came to the police department with an attorney and declined to speak with the investigators.
The charge is murder. That during the month of August 2018, the defendant, Samantha Raybon, did solicit co-defendants to murder Robert and Robbie Ford. Do you want to talk to us?
No.
Okay.
She comes across as somebody quite cold and controlled, possibly thinking that she may be able to get away with it.
Given the horrific nature of the crime, we were hoping at some point she would show some sort of remorse, try to come up with some reason to make this make sense.
Detectives pressed Teresa Martin on why Samantha plotted to kill Robbie and Robert.
Okay? Tell it. Plain and simple. Stop covering up for this murderous woman who's trying to drag you down a hole with her.
Samantha plotted all this so she'd inherit everything.
Has she talked about that before?
The only thing that I've heard her say, that if something happened to her daddy and brother, she would inherit everything.
Investigators follow the money.
Before the murder, Samantha was living in a single-wide trailer that had a value of approximately $32,000. After the murders, the properties that she inherited were worth quite a bit more than that, not to mention pensions, savings accounts, so she ended up inheriting over $1 million. What we came to find out is that Robbie was the primary beneficiary to many of Robert's assets.
She wanted both of them killed before he left to go to college, because she knew if just her daddy got killed, then she would have to split everything with Robbie.
Greed can be so destructive, driven by envy, by fear. It can be driven by rage, and there are no winners here. Everybody's had a price to pay.
Granger is given 2 life sentences. Martin takes a plea deal. Both agree to testify against Samantha.
The courtroom was packed for her trial. There were staunch supporters of Samantha Raybon, and there were just as many people who believed to their soul that she had done it. and there was a clear divide in the courtroom. But it's not every day that you see a man sit on a witness stand and admit to cold-bloodedly murdering two people. Granger said that Martin dropped him off at the Ford home and he laid in wait for them to come home. While he was waiting there, he would smoke cigarettes, but he didn't want to leave that DNA at the crime scene, so he tucked it into his shoe. When Robert and Robbie come home, he drew Robert's attention. Robert turned, he shot him in the head. Granger then went up to Robbie, put the gun against his head, and executed him. He takes the car to the field, takes off the skull cap, takes off the sweatpants that he had been wearing over his jeans, and changed shoes. And it must have been at that point that the cigarette butts fell out onto the ground and he didn't notice it. He had gasoline and lit the car on fire, shut the door, and walked off, not knowing that the fire wouldn't completely consume the car.
That critical mistake meant that a lot of evidence was still within that vehicle. It's a common misconception that fire destroys DNA.
With so much forensic evidence putting Granger at the crime scene, Samantha's defense attacks the credibility of his witness testimony.
It's the job of the defense attorney to try and knock your testimony out from the jury. There's a lot of tensions over, is the person going to be found guilty? Is there a chance they're going to be let off?
But the prosecution has an ace up their sleeve.
One of the theories that we presented at trial related back to that whole burglary of Robert's home, not quite a year from the murders. Granger testified that Samantha told him she had taken some things from her father's home to make it look like a burglary.
Is this the gun you saw?
Yeah.
Both Granger and Martin identified the gun that was stolen as what Samantha gave Granger to use as the murder weapon, so it certainly does seem that she had been planning this for a while.
The jury retires.
That is probably the most tension you will ever feel, and people who have worked with me know that they should not talk to me. At that point, I've done as much as I can do. There was a lot of outside pressure with this one simply because the community was so invested in the trial. Robert and Robbie were very well loved in the community. And I think that added pressure that I don't feel in every trial I do.
Samantha is found guilty of Robert and Robbie's murders and sentenced to life without parole.
When the judge read the sentence, I said to my partner, did I just hear that right? Because it was just a relief at that point. It was a case that really meant a lot to me.
Without the forensic evidence in this case, it may not have been solved. Forensic evidence is what told the story of what happened and who's responsible.
Use of forensic genetic genealogy in America has been a real breakthrough for them. There's no doubt about it, because they've had now over 1,000 cases where forensic genetic genealogy has actively been involved in the case.
If you've got DNA evidence that links to an offender, it's the lead that you don't want to give up on.
Samantha Rabin, to this day, has never shown an ounce of remorse. It's certainly not unheard of for a family member to kill another family member. But what was unusual here was the real deviousness, the advanced planning that had to take place before the murders even occurred. And it just really shows a coldness of heart.